Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sexy Business Podcast. As always, I'm your adorable bartender, Lewd Neko, and helping me out tonight is Spooky Dangerous.
Hello.
And today we are going to be doing another interview episode. This time we are interviewing the developer of the bartender sexy game, Succum Brewery. Welcome in, Lime Juice. Say hello.
Hi, nice to be here, Neko and Spooky. It's a pleasure.
All right. Now, this is a game that I've actually been kind of following off and on for a bit. I streamed a couple episodes of it a long time ago, 2 years ago, so a pretty significant amount of time. And then I recently did come back and do a quick little stream of it to kind of check out how it's developed since. And we were able to get in contact with the devs, so now we get to pick your brain about all of the really interesting stuff that happens in this game. But before that, do you want to kind of give us like your elevator pitch for like this game? Like, how would you describe it if you were just pitching it to someone?
Oh gosh. So I mean, it is a your kind of standard, female protagonist, like I guess moral degradation, corruption style game, but with a lot more focus on the story and the characters and a lot of kind of humor in there. It's a cyberpunk world. She's been, uh, you know, ran out of money mid transport, got kicked off, ended up on a rooftop, but it's kind of like a Judge Dredd style rooftop, where it's a 100 200 stories tall, and there's no way to get to ground level. So she ends up making a deal with a kind of dormant AI that runs a business of your choice, and she decides to run a bar. And the AI is kind of obsessed with running the best business possible and customer service. And as he kind of sees how what customers want in the bar, that starts changing how he views the world. And the two of them kind of play off of each other in the sense that she has an effect on how he behaves, and then he has an effect on her, and so they're both kind of corrupting each other in a way as the story goes on.
I like that. It's like mutual corruption. That's really awesome. Now, we always like to kind of start off by asking people, like, basically, like a little bit of like their origin story, because it's a pretty unique space to be in, like the adult game space. And, we've seen so many people from so many different backgrounds. So, like, tell us a little bit about basically like what kind of like got you here. Like, this could be like the origin story of like, oh, I've started off playing these kinds of games, or it could just be like one day, I woke up and I decided like I want to do one of these. Like, what was that like?
So that was like, I could describe it as kind of manic. Like it was this. So during, I think it was like COVID times where we're spending a lot of time indoors and a lot of free time, and I honestly had no idea outside of like about like MS DOS strip poker kind of thing. I had no idea that there were like I vaguely understood there were adult games out there, but I had no idea that they went beyond like visual novels. Um,
Mm.
and so it was never really an interest of mine. And I think I ran across a screenshot of a game, and the screenshot was of an image that I was like, well, I like that. I'm gonna look this up. And I found the game. I found their their support page. Uh, you know, downloaded the game, got started supporting it, and started playing the first adult game that I played, which was Karen's Prison,
Oh, nice.
which
That's a
was
good one.
which was a wild jumping off point because my expectations were all of them are like this. This is what all of the games like. I was like so excited that I found, and then I was like, okay, none of them are like this. This is its own like special category of game. And but I started kind of scrolling through finding other maybe similar games, and I ran across another game that was just really simple. It was like kind of 3D model graphics. It was very kind of visual novelty. It was standard RPG maker, and I was just like had this little itch in the back of my head that was like, well, I can't make a game like that, but I could make a game like this. Like I could have little characters walk around on a screen, and I could have them interact, and I can write dialogue, and I I do writing in my personal life, and I write outside of the adult game space. And so I was like, well, I could. This sounds like a challenge, and I could do this. So I watched 100 hours of RPG Maker tutorial videos because I figured I would need to start with something that could kind of hold my hand. I've never made a game, never done any kind of programming of any kind. I'm not even particularly tech savvy. Like for me, Discord was before this. Discord was where you go to like organize your WoW guild raids or whatever. Like it was not. I had no idea that there was like communities and other things out there. So I had to get like social media accounts and learn what they were and all this stuff that was like part of all of that. And so I stayed up till like 2 in the morning that first night just painting maps. And I got a bunch of bought a bunch of assets for tile sets and found a bunch of cyberpunk imagery that I really liked. And I just kind of started making it. And after about 6 months, I started looking more seriously for an artist. And I just went to like any space I could find where I could see people advertising their stuff. And I saw a guy on Reddit, and I really liked his kind of style that he had. It was really kind of unique. And I reached out, and it was this point where uh, I'd never reached out. I'd never commissioned a piece of art, or let alone like adult art. And so there's that first message that you send to someone where you're like, "Hey, I'm making a game. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before. Uh, and would you like to work with me on this? But I'll pay you, but just so you know, it might fail, and I'll do like 3 orders from you, and then this will all just go away." And he was super excited. I was like, I've always wanted to work on a game, and so we started putting in the orders and stuff. And then 6 more months went by, and I built the demo, and it was a year to the day from when I started the game to when I released it online, and just kind of went to see what would happen. And I funny enough, I had surgery scheduled for that same time. Nothing serious, but I was in the hospital, and I was watching the patron numbers starting to like go up, and I was like in a fever dream of like what is happening. And I showed the nurse. I was like, look, it's my game. Like, and they're just like, yeah, whatever, buddy. Like, and so I kind of came back from that, was like, okay, like now because I don't start things I'm not going to finish. So I was like, well, now I have to take this like super seriously. I have to have an update schedule. I have to people have sent me money. They're expecting me to like follow through. And so that there became this, what is now for the last 2 years been a constant pressure of like
to
meet
deliver.
due dates and get stuff out the door, and but it's been good because as a writer, one of the things we love to do is procrastinate. And so having a due date kind of forces me to be on top of it all the time. And so all of that was like, it all kind of happened in like a blur, where it was just like, I found a game I liked, and I think I can do this. And then I started doing it, and people really liked it. The thing that really stood out to me though was in those the game has like an 8-day intro where you kind of get introduced to the world. And in those first 8 days, as I wrote them, I was arguing with an imaginary person over my shoulder saying, please just bear with me while I lay the groundwork, you know? And I was like, I know you don't want to hear me talk about the world and what's going on and all this stuff, but like, bear with me. And then when the game actually came out, all these people were like, I love the writing, I love the characters, I love the story. And I was like, I wasn't expecting that at all. I figured they would be like, I slogged through all of your annoying world building and I finally seen a boob, and I'm, so you get that. And I have, I think that, I'd never interacted with fans either, but I had seen the fans of other games, and I figured all my fan interactions would be where pregnancy, where feet, and that would just be
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, we get a lot of that as
But
well.
instead of everyone was like, just it. The community around the this game, but the other kind of games that I'm kind of adjacent to their communities, they're all very nice people for the most part. Like it's the like adult gaming community is a pretty like nice group of people that's like that I've enjoyed interacting with all of them.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. Where like I've been doing like lewd tubing for the past like, 5 years or so. Because it was also a pandemic hobby for me that just turned into like, oh, this is my life now. Um and I mean, when I first started off, I wasn't even doing camming. I was just playing adult games. And I was kind of anticipating, I was like, man, half of my chat is just gonna be absolute creeps who are trying to derail me the entire time. And no, it's just like people who were like, oh, you're actually playing the game. You're not just using that as like bait. And I was like, yeah, no, I actually like these games. And so I've had like so many like really great or like in-depth interactions with people, or like we'll get to particularly emotional moments in games, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, this part's so sad." But I mean, I think that's one of the things I was particularly impressed of with Succum Brewery is like it does have such a fun world that it's in, and you get such a strong feeling for the characters, like because it has that introduction period. Because me and Spooky have talked a lot about like how the introduction, especially of an adult game, can really make it or break it, because a lot of people are going to drop it fairly easily, or like when you're making early access content or demos and stuff like that, it does become like, okay, where boob. And I mean, I think this game, we kind of talk about how like you have like about an hour kind of like limit of, I think the average adult game consumer will give you an hour before you show something sexy and then they'll leave. But we kind of like get to the sexy stuff, I would say within an hour. We get our first like kind of training sequence, and you get like that implication of like, ooh, this is gonna get good. And so like that's like a really nice hook. And the other thing I'll say is like, me and Spooky, we love to like rag on the RPG Maker engine a lot. And I feel like we need to do an apology episode at this point, because like now that we have like so much AI slop, I'm thankful for every RPG Maker game that exists. I'm like, at least someone worked on this and like cared about it and had cool art or had a cool concept or whatever it is they wanted to do. Like at least a human did it, as opposed to like the 2000 like AI generated visual novels we're getting.
I do want
And
to put an asterisk on that though, because yes, and me in particular do beat the drum that RPG Maker game bad, but very often Neko brings up Succum Brewery as like the good RPG Maker
I liked
game.
this one.
Because Neko has been talking about this game for a long time and has been like, hey, we should play this. It's been on our to play and go and talk about kind of list for ages. And having the dev come on and talk is obviously going to be way more interesting for the fans and stuff like that than us just playing it. But I don't know, it's like greatly foreshadowed in the ancient murals at this point. And I think it's good timing, because we did recently talk about how bad AI slop content is getting, because we have had requests to review some of them and we are seeing how prevalent they are on the market. To have something come along that we were perhaps more dismissive of earlier, to actually show that yes, there is a lot of talent in this kind of thing. It does have the ability to be an incredibly immersive experience and show things beyond what some of the classic problems have, because like a lot of my complaints about RPG Maker is normally game design issues, where it's filled with a lot of empty space, or there's just like a lot of filler time because of the engine rather than actually delivering narrative or delivering boob, and it makes it harder to get involved in, whereas your game really does keep a pretty good tempo. You are kind of doing stuff the whole time. You're not ever really wandering around. So I'm curious as to what your kind of game design bible, so to say, was when it came to designing the game. Like, did you have a type of experience in mind? Were you really focusing on delivering a story? Were you like mapping out when you wanted the player to be jerking it? Like, how did this all come together?
Yeah, for the writing side, I kind of have two rules, which is if it has to be funny or it has to be erotic, and if it's not those things, I probably shouldn't be writing it. And there's some limit to that, right? Because I'm still trying to build a world with some weight to it, where the characters, this stuff means a lot more when the characters have personalities and the stuff like has some meaning to it. I think it's always weird when you have the game and the character, gets trapped in the goblin cave for like a month, and then they come out and they're like, time to go do my job at the coffee place, and you're like, wow, geez, you recovered real quick from like there's not a lot of emotional weight to it. So I still want the characters to stand out, but I do kind of avoid that like rambling of things where I try to keep it real snappy. And the RPG Maker, just the window that you're kind of forced to write in, kind of makes you write in a different way, in a way that I'm not used to writing as someone who like writes books, because everything has to be uh, said in like 3 sentences at a time. And so I've played a lot of games where that intro is like 7,000 years ago, the Demon King, and then you hold the skip button, and you're like, I've held skip for like 8 minutes straight, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I I do not care about the Demon King. Like it's like it's so I I want to care about the Demon King in the context of the world, and you have to introduce that stuff slowly rather than just come out the gate and go. Once upon a time, there was an AI in a building, and like it just like it kind of loses people. The the actual like design, I think I thought a lot about the maps, and I found making the maps to be really challenging because you are trying to like kind of leave yourself enough room to like put stuff in there, but also not have this kind of vast castle that's 15 screens long or something. Uh and so it was kind of trying to make everything tight enough to kind of fit with what was going to happen in the future of the game, which meant planning a lot of that stuff out. I eventually added in a sewer section, and I'm still kind of on the fence about that because the sewer section was kind of an excuse to show some stuff that maybe didn't make sense for the bar. So it was just like I have my tennis court down there and my bathhouse and all this other stuff that's like, if you haven't played the game, it won't make a lot of sense. But there's a sewer area, and I kind of was like, I don't know if it's a good idea to add more space because I like how tight the rooftop is, and I like how tight all of the spaces are. And so I do try to like think a lot about like how much time the player is spending on things. And over the course of the development, I've kind of gone back and increased the speed that things happen at. And eventually I plan on going in and adding more kind of little linking scenes to add more tension and add more story to things, partly just because people have requested it and they want to kind of see more in between stuff for the ramp up to things. But I also have a development cycle where I try to get 2 or 3 scenes out. So I think that the story kind of moves faster than I'm always ready for, but I'm trying to make sure everyone has new content coming out whenever there's an update.
Yeah, we have the same pressure because it's the Patreon monthly cycle. We release an update every single month, but also we have 4 games, and each of the games is a content release every month, which means that we're kind of constantly juggling and churning and have that pressure to have new content. Because whenever we do something that's not new content, people are like, I don't care. There was nothing for me this month, or the one game that I cared about, nothing really happened. So there is always kind of that, okay, I have to have something new. I can't spend time going back and fixing something that's old because it's not new content or whatever. And it's a lot harder
Yeah.
to sell that as a thing to keep a person subscribed and keep a person engaged in the way that it's kind of built together. So I am curious, how do you feel that like, are you beholden to that same schedule so much? Like, you really following Patreon kind of closely, or do you focus a lot on Steam and itch.io, or has, since the delistings and stuff in July, has that kind of radically changed how you organize everything?
So it was always just a source of eyes on the project. It never really made, because the game's always been free on itch. I have a development cycle where I have 2 kind of Patreon releases, and then the free release on itch for everybody, which will eventually go away once the game is like at like 90% complete. Then I'll just put a demo out there. But in the meantime, I think that people want to try stuff before they buy or support it. And so the itch thing was like, that was a whole thing that we all got delisted. Steam started, banning a bunch of games. There was a whole very stressful period of like, what will happen next? And but I've also found that the the patron numbers are kind of, I feel like I have very little control over them. They kind of hit their peak and they've stayed at that peak, and they've slowly crept up from there, and I've done things to kind of try to get better at advertising and get better at like updating the pages and stuff. And I've talked to other developers about it where they'll say, the adult game dev will do literally anything but advertise their game. They'll, and so it's like, all right, I gotta, and so I made the Steam page. And at first I was like, well, I'm not going to make the Steam page till the game is done. Why would I do it now? And they're like, well, you have to get wish lists. You have to get out there. Like that's your, and I was like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that, because for now the pretty much all the money the game makes goes right back into the game again. The more the game makes, the more I add extra content. So I have the voice acting that I'm slowly adding in. I want to voice some of the other characters. I recently started working with a UI designer to kind of make the mini games look a little nicer and fix up some of the stuff that I'm not very good with. And I work with a pixel artist who helps a lot, who made all the characters and is starting to build a map for me for one of the new areas. And so, it's kind of like the Steam release for me is kind of the big one. And I think that, if I'm perfectly realistic, if the game doesn't get a Steam approval, then I'll kind of happily walk away as like, I'll release the game for free somewhere and I'll say, well, this was like a fun little project that I tried out. And if the game does get a Steam release, then like I will keep making games, because at that point it'll all have been worth it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is a really interesting game to be on the scene, and I certainly hope it comes to fruition, because it has so much, I think, that makes it stand out from sort of all of the other RPG Maker games. Like one of the reasons why I think I've praised this one so much to Spooky whenever we talked about RPG Makers is that, I always hated when I was playing an RPG Maker game, and like it has great art, it has potentially like maybe an interesting story, but then it feels like the gameplay is there just because I have to have gameplay. And it's like, well, here's just the typical like fight these guys, grind for a million hours, level up, buy stuff, and then eventually you'll get the next lewd scene. And it's so repetitive because there's so many of the games that are doing the exact same thing. So one of the things that like initially like really drew me to this was like I really liked the whole like bartending mechanic. Like it was so fascinating to me that was sort of like the key like system instead of it being like a fighting based system. And it's relatively simple, but it is a lot of fun. It has like some great art, especially with like the recent update, and I've seen definitely like the UI changes, and I think that's one of the things that really highlights it for me. On top of the fact that like as I've mentioned, like the characters are just really engaging. Not just Catherine, but like I really love IO. I was a huge robot fucker in like high school. I was big into Portal. Wheatley was like one of my like favorite robots, and he's not like Wheatley in that like he's much smarter, but I like that he has the same thing where it's like I like doing this thing and I need to keep doing this thing compulsively of like I just want to maximize the amount of like pleasure we're getting out of this business and profits and stuff like that. Like I find that a lot of fun where he's not exactly evil or anything. He's just a robot that just has a certain kind of programming. But then like we have all of these other like side characters like like Annika and is it Alexa? Yeah, and all of the like shopkeeps and the May, like the businesswoman, who all have like very different personality types. Where Alexa is like kind of conniving and she's like very like off kilter and she just says whatever the fuck she wants, and then you have like the two mechanics who are like an interesting little pair. And so I really liked that this space, even though it is like relatively small, like you're just on the rooftop and you have kind of the associated areas, is like you have just enough characters to really make this world feel interesting without it being exactly like you said, where it's like, oh, 15 screens for this one dungeon that you just kind of have to slog through. Like it's just big enough to be really engaging without feeling overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine with a lot of adult games, especially the RPG Maker games, is I feel like they're very front loaded. And I don't think that the dungeons would always feel like a slog if you were continuously being rewarded with more scenes. But oftentimes you get a bunch of scenes up front and then you find out that's like 80% of the content. And then the other 20% is behind like 20 hours of generic RPG Maker fights or awful game over screens. When I started making the game, on like IO and stuff, it's funny because the game started much more aggressive. Like I was kind of going on my gut where IO was going to be like evil, horny robot, and all of the customers are just going to be super aggressive, generic adult game dudes. And as I started writing the intro, it was like I started writing the intro, and there's Amanda there, and she's like leaving, and now you're introduced to like Io resets or dies when he loses his partner, and he gets this moment to like reprogram himself in some tiny way, and he's been through who knows how many iterations, but in that in that intro, Io's not horny at all. He's completely obsessed with like the customer service and running this clothing operation. And I was like, well, I thought it was really fun because it was a way to remind the character that like Io doesn't always turn out this way, and instead he is turning out this way partly because of the influence of the people around him that are making him this way. And I've had someone describe the game to me as aggressively consensual. That there's a scene early in the game where one of the chuds, Chongo, tries to attack Catherine and immediately gets stopped by Io. And I wanted the player to kind of know that like whatever happens in the bar happens because Catherine is allowing it to happen. And then like everything else in the game, like Chongo went from like a one-off character to like, wouldn't it be funny if Chongo came back? And then I brought Chongo back, and now he's this reoccurring weirdo. And then all of the chuds is the same way. I was really worried about adding humor into the game because I was like, I feel like because the chuds start showing up and I start naming them weird, and I don't even know what I'm going to name them before the scene shows up. And then I've got like, don't ruin it chud and stuff like, and like about to ruin it chud and stuff. And all these guys show up and they're just goofy as hell. And it's the most fun I've had writing anything because I can kind of do whatever I want. And there's an amount of like, I think that people kind of are like, well, it's a funny world, so you're allowed to do this stuff. And it's just been, I can't stop making the chuds the way they are because it entertains me probably more than it does the people playing the game. And so now I just kind of have to do it. And I didn't fully know that like chud had its own like internet connotation as well. I had some people tell me that like the game is offensive because I'm like attacking them. And I'm like, well, that's on you for self-identifying as a chud. But like, I got it from a quote from an old Simpsons episode, which is where like 80% of my humor comes from.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think comedy is actually like a really good fit for a lot of adult games. I mean, there's almost times where like I do appreciate an adult game that can take itself seriously and can have a really kind of interesting, grounded plot and all. But like you said, like some of them do take themselves so seriously that it is just like, oh, I've been holding the skip button for 30 minutes and nothing has happened because it's still giving me more world building. And it's like at that point, you should just probably be writing like a traditional novel. Because like for example, like Spooky's working on a game right now called The Grand Butt Sex Hotel, which,
I
as
was
you can tell from
wondering
the
about
title, is not the most serious game, but it is like it's very funny. It has a cute concept. It's gonna have like lots of sexy characters, and I think that can work really well because you don't necessarily want every single second of the game you're playing to be just like horny, horny, horny. Like here's another sex scene, here's another sex scene. Like eventually my hand hurts or like my vibrator is gonna die. Um, you know, and that's why like it's nice to have those gameplay segments that break things up, but it's also nice to have those little like comedic moments or just like lighthearted moments between the characters where you get to see them interacting. Because I mean I really liked all of the humorous moments. Like I liked seeing all of the silly characterizations of like the chuds. It's something that makes this game unique. And so I personally can say as somebody who's played this, like I really enjoy that. I think that was a good choice for this genre. And it doesn't take away from those like more interesting character moments because you still have kind of like the mystery of like Catherine and like what's going on with her and IO. Like what should she do next? What about all of these characters who are kind of trying to take her down behind her back? That still kind of keeps up like the intrigue or the more serious parts. But I really love a lot of like the bar kind of segments where you just get to see them like fucking around. You get introduced to another funny NPC.
Mm.
And
It's funny because
that does bring us to the
go
end
right
of
ahead.
our time, because we don't like to drag
Oh,
on
okay.
too long. But I do want to give you a chance to throw out any closing stuff. Is there anything you want to say to address the audience, and then maybe give us a place to find all of your games and stuff as well?
Yeah. So the game is not on Steam, but the coming soon page is on Steam. I think realistically that the game has another year and a half of dev time before it'll be complete. And then the game is on Patreon. You get early access there, and then there's always a free version on itch that basically has all of the content that's on Patreon, but 2 weeks after the early release version comes out.
And then we have one last very important question that we ask to everybody. Who is like your all-time favorite husbando and or waifu?
All right, so I think it might be. I started recently watching more anime. I tell my partner it's for research. I gotta I gotta learn what's out there. But I really like the reincarnated as a slime show, and the character Shion, the kind of business secretary lady from that, was probably one of my favorite characters.
Solid. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Lime. And, as we already mentioned, you should definitely check out all of his stuff. There is, the free version of the game. So if you're curious about it, there's nothing stopping you from just going and checking it out. I've also streamed it. So I streamed a very old version of it, like 2 years ago, if you want to hear me read a lot of the dialogue. And then I recently streamed it, just kind of checking out some of the newer content. So that's available too. And then, you've sat through another interview with us, so you should go ahead and make sure to click that subscribe button and turn on the notifications because most of our content just does not get promoted in any way by YouTube. So that way you can get notifications because we release new episodes every single week. And then also go ahead and give us a like and feel free to leave a comment down below. Have you checked out Succum Brewery before? What did you think of this episode? Tell us what you think. Also, feel free to leave down recommendations for maybe games that we should be aware of, or even other developer teams, artists, voice actresses, whoever you think it is that we should be interacting with, because we do read that stuff and we do reply to it sometimes. And I think that's all of the things. So again, thank you so much for coming, and thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time on the Sexy Business Podcast. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.